Broadcasting from Silicon Valley, California, this is Conversations with Jennylyn.
You're watching Conversations with Jennylyn, and as I continue my COVID World interview series, I have another fascinating gentleman to share with you today, Mr. Brian Hayward, and he is the president of Aldare. Is that how it's Aldare?
Aldare Resources, yes.
Aldare Resources. And I'm very grateful to him for taking time out to spend with me this morning. Brian, welcome to my show.
So glad to be here.
So tell me a little bit about your company. I've never heard of it before. I looked up a little bit, but I'd like to hear from you.
Sure. I started actually the company in 2007. I had been chief executive officer of one of Canada's largest agri-food businesses, and we were involved in a takeover battle, and thankfully for our shareholders, it all worked out well. But after having been involved in running a public company for 17 years as a CEO, I really didn't want to do that again, and I thought I would work in areas where at a higher level on governance, on helping people advance strategy, and also in terms of developing younger executives. I'm getting older, unfortunately, and so I've been probably right now one of the most satisfying things is to work with guys and women that are in their late 30s, early 40s that are, coming into being senior C-suite individuals around the time that I did when I was in my mid to late 30s, and just helping them understand pace, just how to sometimes be quiet, even because when you're that age, sometimes you're a little bit frantic. So those are the things I'm involved in, and I'm actually just putting the finishing touches to a book on chairmanship that I'm pleased to say is probably going to be, I'm hoping in September, maybe late August, that it will be launched. It's called The Great Chair.
The Great Chair. I like the name, very catchy. Is this your first book?
Yeah, actually, it probably my last. I was talking with my publisher, and I told him, I said, probably because I'm a photographer, amateur photographer, but I said, that if I did another one, it wouldn't be in the same area. The book itself came about because I've probably been through the course of my career involved with 500-600 board meetings. Not-for-profits, different types of organizations, public companies, family companies, venture capital firms. And what struck me was that sometimes the meetings are really bad, and sometimes they're good. And I was going, well, is it the sandwiches? Is it, the nature of the agenda, or is it the people? And where I came to finally is that it was actually the person that was coordinating, chairing the meeting that had a huge part of what made a good meeting. When you left the room afterwards, you said that was time well spent versus saying that was a waste of time and not getting that back. And so, there's been very little that's been written about chairing as a separate activity. We've had people recognize that directorship is an activity that requires training and continuous professional development, but being a chair is actually something that's another level higher, and especially when you look at the trend in public companies, for sure, where the separation of the CEO and the chair used to be one and the same pretty well all the time. In Canada, at least, that's certainly not the case now. It's probably only maybe 40% of companies have the chair and CEO combined. So it's becoming an activity in its own right. And all you have to do is, from point of view of probably everybody that would be listening to this, is think about Boeing. After the second crash,
yes,
there was a motion by the shareholders to separate the chair and the CEO, which was defeated. The board said, don't do that unanimously. And then subsequently, about 6 months later, they split the chair and the CEO, and saying they wanted the CEO to focus on the issues and the strategy of the company, and not so much on the governance side. And ultimately, the person that was the CEO and chair was terminated. So that's really, you know, the summary of it. So I've actually made the book as readable as possible, because I don't want this to be academic. So there's all sorts of stories about Paul McCartney, Kalahari Bushman, and so the great chair. You'll see it on my LinkedIn page and on Amazon coming this in a couple of months.
So this has been your first experience with a book, writing a book?
Yeah, it's actually been a lot of fun. I don't know if you've actually published a book.
Never.
But
everybody is publishing one, so I need to get going.
Yeah, you know, you probably have, through all the interviews you've done, you could probably compile it into a book in its own right. But there's all sorts of logistics on it, the images, the whether or not your trim size is 6x9, 7x11. I had no idea. And then there's a sequence to it as well to get people to, you know, those quotes that are on the back of every book that, you know, it's the most wonderful book ever.
Yes.
So
Yes.
you have to actually provide the book to somebody, but you know, all the sequencing and the positioning is quite the thing. And ultimately, I do have the domain, The Great Chair, and I've got to deal with promotion and exposure through social media and online as well.
So are you Canadian? Because you don't sound Canadian.
What does a Canadian sound like?
It says certain words, and for some reason, none of it's popping into my head right now.
Well, we go out, and we have process.
Yes, yes. So, are you Canadian?
I am Canadian. I'm from Quebec. Je parle français aussi because I'm from Montreal. So, and I keep my French alive. My wife and I actually have a place just north of Montreal, but with all of the travel restrictions, we in Manitoba actually are in a very interesting situation. For those of you who might see this interview later or whatever, today's May the 12th, 13th, and we have approximately 1 new case per day of COVID-19, and the total actives now has fallen from about 200 down to about 30. So we're being socially
Contaminated cases or 200 deaths?
No, we've only had 7 deaths.
Wow, that's impressive.
So what's interesting though is that we're not allowed to leave the province. So we're actually a little bit of an island here. The border with the United States is closed, and for those who aren't familiar, we're approximately 100 kilometers from the border with Ontario. And on the west side, we're about probably 200 kilometers to the border of Saskatchewan. We're not allowed to go outside, even within Manitoba. Northern Manitoba is a distinct part of our geography.
Yes.
And above the 53rd parallel of latitude, there's another invisible border where they don't want people. There's First Nations that have not had any issues with COVID-19, and so the bulk of any problems or issues have been in the city of Winnipeg, which is about 1 million people. So we're kind of with very, very few cases, we're in a little island. It's almost like New Zealand in a way. We've got a small population, lots of land around us, but we're restricted from moving in or for people to come in. Anybody coming into Manitoba needs to quarantine for 14 days. And so the United States border is essentially locked down, except for essential trade and services. So there's really no flights happening in Canada for the most part. Much more. Some of folks might be familiar with some of the apps like Flight Aware, where you can actually see real-time airplane traffic. And you can tell where the border is between Canada and the United States, because we're not really opening up. And it's a bit frustrating for people here because the incidence of the virus is so low. At the
maybe
same
if it
time,
weren't that way, maybe if it weren't that way, then you wouldn't have such a load.
exactly, and so there's an awareness. The traffic in the city is way down. I just saw last night in the city, bus traffic ridership is down 70%. We still can't really go shopping. If you go into a mall, for instance, probably at this point, maybe 1/3 of the stores are open. The food courts are closed. It's not a pleasant experience, actually. So nobody, it's like the Yogi Berra used to say, nobody goes there anymore. It's too busy. It's just people don't want to go because it's empty. It doesn't feel right.
But you know, some countries are fudging their numbers, and I think I get why. But you think that the numbers that you are declaring in Canada, you think they're the correct? I mean, they're true to what's happening there.
Absolutely. I think the only thing that we would probably say is that sometimes the testing that was done by a private lab, and then they actually realized that some of their techniques, because of the volume that we're going through. So there's been occasionally some revisions, but they've been consistent. And there's a very different approach in Canada to dealing with it, where the public health authorities are front and center. Typically at 10:15 Eastern time, the Prime Minister gets, because he was actually had his wife actually.
I heard.
So yeah, so he didn't have, he's never been tested positive, but his wife was, so he was quarantined, and so he was giving a press conference every day outside of his residence on the street for about 45 minutes to talk about programs, policies, responses to help liquidity in businesses. But the actual kind of coordination of social distancing has been handled within each province by a public health official.
Okay.
So at usually it's been in my time zone would be 1 o'clock. Dr. Brent Rusin, who is now in Manitoba, a rock star, has sat down and everybody knows who he is, and he gives an update and what the directives are. And people, maybe it's just us being Canadian, even though our process is, we go out and about, yes, but we do it differently. I think we're more socially conscious. There's been very few demonstrations or reactions to against the suggestions and advice of public health officials. We're abiding by what they're doing. It doesn't make it easy, but we're looking forward. I became a grandfather in February.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I actually had bookings to go and visit because my grandson is in Victoria, BC, and I just get pictures. We'll go there when it's safe to do. But British Columbia as well is fairly clean. They reacted very similar to Washington State. So I'll get there when it's right, when it's time.
So are you happy with the way your government has handled the situation?
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities around the world with essentially a lot of pressure to maintain social distancing and be mindful of washing your hands. I think that's universal. And also a reaction, Canadian federal budget deficit was amongst the lowest in the OECD, but there's been all sorts of programs that have some similarity to programs in other countries, other jurisdictions, where there's been support for small businesses.
Yeah.
There's been support for certain industries, certain communities, and what's difficult for us is, as I was saying, in Manitoba and Western Canada, for the most part, has been very lucky for whatever reason, and not really hit too hard by comparison with places like New York. Most of the Canadian cases, probably about 60%, are in Quebec. And so a lot of us are ready to open up, and we're 2,000 kilometers from Quebec, but the federal government is saying, look, let's all, be mindful. And so travel and movement has been difficult within the entire country. We're the second largest country in the world, and we're really not moving around. And so there's pockets in Atlantic Canada, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, where the incidence is very low, parts of Western Canada where the incidence is very low, Central Ontario, Toronto, Montreal, that's where the problem is. And so by and large, people are supportive, and I think we will be for some time. I think the other thing, which may be more in the public mindset here relative to, say, the United States, would be the possibility of a second wave.
Yeah.
I'm involved right now on a project. That's why I appreciate moving the time that we were going to do this, where we're actually looking at how we might mobilize some PPE, not for the situation right now, but because there's a concern that there may be a second wave. And I think we're not alone in that. When there was a shortage of PPE, everybody was scrambling for it. And there was a moment in time where the Premier of Ontario in particular said, we're not going to see this ever happen again, where we're reliant on other jurisdictions to provide us.
Right.
We're going to make sure that we are self-sufficient in PPE.
So what have you learned? For some reason, I woke up this morning with a funny throat, but I don't have COVID. What has this taught you about yourself, this experience, this pandemic?
I've always been, I think, a person that's been self-reliant, and I think what it's done for me personally is actually help me confirm or be confident in in being self-reliant, and making choices personally, but also communicating and engaging with community. I think what I find fascinating, and probably not unique to Manitoba or Canada, is I know my neighbors a lot more. The people are waving to each other and saying, "Hi, how are you doing?" And somebody goes by in the car, and I've taken on the job of going out and getting groceries and such for our home.
Oh,
And
no.
just in the supermarket, people are, it's funny because there's direction. I'm sure it's the same pretty well everywhere. There's an arrow, like it's a one-way street, but people are looking and engaging each other, and I think in ways that are different and respectful, and more mindful of that we're in a community. Somebody said all politics is local, but we've tended to talk about globalization for the last 20 years, and I think what's happening in a very quiet, inferential way is that we're actually realizing that we're in a small community. I would help probably not that I wouldn't help my neighbors before, but I'm much more observant and mindful. Say, do you need me to get you something, or is there a way I can help you? That I don't think we were quite engaged that way, and I suspect that's probably happening in a lot of places.
Yeah, it's so funny how certain things that we've just taken for granted are being brought to our attention. Like, did you notice what a privilege it is to be able to walk in a grocery store in any particular direction you want to go and not have to pay attention to how close you're standing to someone? It's amazing. The things that we've taken for granted that are now becoming obvious that they're actually privileges and that they can be taken away as they are now. Fortunately for us, it's hopefully temporary. What will you do different? You mentioned travel at the beginning of this interview. It sounds like you're someone who traveled quite a bit for your business. Do you see yourself continuing to do that, or are you going to conduct more business virtually as we are now?
I think there's no question it's not a me thing. I think that that I'm doing much more business, and I think, you know, part of what's happening, and I believe will happen, is that previously it's almost like a chicken and egg thing. You didn't do business virtually, or you didn't have these kind of conversations because nobody else was doing it. But as soon as we kind of moved into a universe where we're not allowed to engage, and this is the only choice, we're all becoming very familiar with making a Zoom appointment or Microsoft Teams or whatnot. And I think it's interesting. One of my clients is actually in the medical affairs business, and they sell pharmaceuticals to. They're based in Canada, based in Winnipeg here, but their major marketplace is actually in the southern quadrant of the United States.
Okay.
And they would be visiting physicians, so that would involve taking a flight from Winnipeg to Minneapolis down to, say, Atlanta or somewhere, for instance, renting a car, going on a circuit, visiting physicians. And I said the other day, you probably had to do it that way because the physicians, that's how what their habit was, how they were socialized in terms of dealing with pharmaceutical sales. But now, because essentially the border is closed between Canada and the United States, but also for us to fly anywhere, we're not really allowed to go. But the physicians are actually dealing with things differently. And I said to one of their senior executives the other day, this is working for you because your clients are actually quite comfortable now. They're doing their business that way.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the challenges, I'm involved in a couple of governance organizations, and I was on a webinar the other day, which normally would have been a conference. And the dean of the University of Toronto Rotman School of Management and I posed a question on the chat window on the side to say, how do we network and encounter new things when we're actually making appointments by Zoom? Because there's so many times when you've taken a course or you've been at a conference, and you fill out a questionnaire afterward. What is the best thing? I met the people. And that random behavior networking that we used to have by virtue of going to a course, going to a conference, is very difficult, if not impossible to do. If you're going to a conference and I was on something the other day just with Diligent, and there was, I think, 400 or so. It was a large group of people, but I wasn't going to have coffee and have a chat with somebody at a break. So I think we're going to have to figure out ways as we free up to integrate the random connections that are part of our society with the structure of things like this. And so I suspect what we're going to see is in opening up are smaller conferences where people get to connect, and maybe they're more expensive, just like air travel is probably likely to get more expensive. But there's got to be a way to do that, because we are at our essence, we are social people, social animals.
Yeah, when you think, I've gone to some trade shows myself because I do marketing apart from this. You have to get packed. You have to get to the airport. You have to get on an airplane. You have to take a taxi to your hotel, unpack, go to the seminar. A lot of times you're tired. When you think in terms of time spent just getting there and in preparation to go there, look at how much more we are getting done now.
Yeah.
And we're
Yeah.
also saving the air. So I keep saying I see a flip side to this virus. I know it's a big, bad pandemic and it's killing a lot of people, but I feel that it's teaching us to create more balance in our lives. Do you agree?
Yeah, very much, very much. I think, it, there's the time between one Zoom meeting and another one,
Right.
or you probably would be
What's your
stressed out.
coffee?
Yeah, exactly. And I think now, it's a wonderful time of year where I live. It's 20 degrees out Celsius, and beautiful, air is clear. Taking the dog for a walk, all of that time, to even if you're not in an airplane, all that time that we were taking to drive somewhere. I don't live in San Francisco, but still, to go to a meeting or to go into office or whatever is probably an hour of my day, of my waking time.
Right.
So that's actually a gift that, and I think it de-stresses you by not having to be in a crowded situation.
On the clock, right?
Yeah, exactly.
When's the last time you woke up this time of the year and you're able to admire the beauty that was existing outside of your door? When was the last time you stood in your kitchen or your living room and looked out and thought, what a beautiful day, I see the birds, I see the flowers.
Yeah, absolutely.
If this hadn't happened to us, I think a lot of us would just continue to just go. So
Here's the other things that I think, again, are probably not uncommon, is my alarm is set much less frequently. I'm going to bed a little bit earlier. This is really nothing on television or something that I'm dealing with, and I don't want to be doing a video conference at 9 or 10 o'clock. And so but I'm not setting the alarm. And also, there's the weekends seem to have. There used to be, there's an old rock song. Everybody's working for the weekend.
right.
And I think now weekends are the barrier, the delineation between Friday and Saturday and between Sunday and Monday is a lot fuzzier than what it was before.
I hardly remember what day it is anymore.
Yeah.
They're saying to me, what have you done to your skin? Your skin looks great. I'm like, I'm on lockdown. What can I do to my skin? I'm just eating and sleeping better. You know?
Yeah, but sometimes we eat better too. So
right, exactly.
I have to make sure that we don't give
when
it
you're
too
on
much.
the run, you just grab whatever you can get when you're hungry. And now that you're home, you actually have time to prepare your meals and all that. Would you say that the majority of deaths that you've had in Canada were geriatric patients? Because a lot of the interviews I've done in the past, they're telling me the majority of the people that they've lost were older people.
There's no question at all that that's been the case. The statistics I've mentioned, Quebec is being one of the real hot spots, but within Quebec, it's been in Montreal. Within Montreal, it's been in elder care. I'm actually involved as a volunteer on a board of an extended health care facility organization called Action Margaret. It's part of the Francophone community here in Manitoba that sort of services that. And we've been extraordinarily careful on making sure that we have proper PE, that people are really not allowed to go in. But in some jurisdictions, and I know being on the board of this one, we've already started talking about needing a new model for elder care instead of compact or facilities where people are in a proximate location. There's a lot of people moving around and surely there's going to be a vaccine, I think, someday, but that's not going to be the issue. In Quebec in particular, when things really, and it's not better there, that's where the military's actually been deployed, is in old folks' homes. There's been a realization that the model that was created in the 1970s probably worked, but there's other ways that we should be dealing with, essentially putting people in institutions and forgetting about them. I know there's different models in the Netherlands in particular for dealing with people with dementia.
Yeah.
And so I think, you've hit on, Jenny, on a really important point, is that I think it's going to be a major project, even if there's a vaccine, that there's going to be a re-examination of the nature of elder care, and what's the right way to do it. We need to look at this, and because some of the facilities, even it's not a matter of building more buildings or making spaces bigger. It's a much more sophisticated issue, and I think it's one that we're not going to resolve quickly with bricks and mortar.
Right. What programs are you aware of, or mandated programs that you're aware of that your government has in place, so as you open up your quarantine, you avoid a resurgence? Are you aware of any?
Oh, no, as I said, the public health authority, so in Canada, healthcare our constitution is different. There's responsibilities that are at a Canadian level. There are certain issues that are designated and delegated to be provincial responsibilities. So we have universal health care.
Yes.
I would say that contrary to some of the things that get said in the United States, probably 80 to 90% of Canadians would fully support that system of healthcare versus the kind that's in the United States. And having said that, we have universal access. We're not worried about insurance. We're not worried, and I think people appreciate it more now after COVID than prior to COVID. Each province, though, runs the healthcare system. So there's a framework nationally, and then within each province. So in Manitoba, Dr. Roussin is in charge. He sets the guidelines and the parameters for opening. So it is fundamentally, it's the public health officials that are saying, you can't go across here, you can't do that, you can't go here. And when they're opening up, they are the ones, the public health authorities. It's handled differently in each province, and so Quebec is opening up a bit more quickly than probably some people think they should, but each province is very mindful, and the public health authorities are the ones that are driving what the rules are within each. And so I would say, there's 10 different provinces in Quebec. There's 10 different ways of opening up, and that are dictated by local circumstances. Our provinces are so much larger than American states. They're the size of countries. So, I think it gives us some advantage to say, in a province the size of Manitoba, which is probably would be the equivalent of 10 states, we can draw lines within there, say this is what we're doing in this area or this area. So in answer to your question, there are rules, they're understood, they're clearly communicated by the public health people, they're respected. They differ slightly by province and even within a province. As I said, at the 53rd parallel latitude, there's a line, and you're not really supposed to go across that line, otherwise you're quarantined. I'm not a health official, I know that. Everybody knows, nope, you don't do this. I'm not allowed to go more than 50 kilometers into Ontario. So there's a cottage country, Lake of the Woods. People are going there. They know there's a border check. How far are you going? What are you doing? People are it's been extremely well communicated, and generally fairly simple guidelines, like don't go more than 2 meters near somebody, etc.
How about masks? Are those mandatory? Wearing masks when you're out in public?
In some places, they're mandatory. I think what's interesting, especially in cities like Montreal or Toronto, where there's mass transit, and we haven't had that issue. That said, when I go to the supermarket, there's been no, how do I put it? There's no guideline, there's no suggestion, but people on their own right have actually, probably I would say maybe 10, 20% of people now are wearing some form of mask. The rest of the people, I put myself in that category, frankly. We live in a large area with lots of open space and a population of the entire province of under 2 million, and 1 million people approximately in the city of Winnipeg. There's one new case a day. There's all sorts of other bugs and bad stuff out there that are more prevalent. So I think people are taking, so long as you're socially distant,
Yeah.
and you're washing your hands, people are looking at it and go, and there's only now in the entire geography 25 cases of that are active. We're not letting up, we're not putting on masks, but we're not going back to the way we were. No way.
I am so grateful to you. I know you're busy, and I know you made a lot of effort to get this time to spend with me. And believe it or not, the time is up. You were wonderful, and I'm so grateful that you were able to provide us with all those facts. Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure. Everybody stay healthy, stay safe.
Yes, and you continue to stay COVID-free. I am going to be looking out for your book. And I thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for watching Conversations with Jennylyn. When a conversation is all you need to be inspired, like the one I just had with Brian. And I will see you next time. Thank you, Brian.